Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good evening. Today is Black Monday, the day the Dow dropped more than 500 points.
Please join me in welcoming George Soros.
Everybody's panic. Everyone's everybody would try to find a bottom.
To stand up and do something, become really engaged in the electoral process in this country.
What we have to confront is a deep, systemic, and structural restructuring of our world. And this will take some time. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process.
For centuries, they've been stuffing their stomachs with human flesh, and they've been stuffing their pockets with money. But they must realize that this bowl of vampires is about to end.
We have an army of digital soldiers.
That this is coming. This is going to be a part of a future where we can take back our power in ways we didn't even think about in the industrial age that are coming in the digital age.
But the common people of these countries in their heart, they can feel what's happening. They can see our struggle for our independence, for our true sovereignty. And they see this connection with their aspirations to be truly independent, which is exacerbated by the fact that in the Western elites there is a strong desire to freeze the current unfair state of things in international affairs.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next President of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
People who don't believe are walking dead. They are asleep. And this is the awakening.
Muted. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Book of Trump. I am your host, Gordon McCormick, the ghost of base Patrick Henry. This is chapter 36, and I'm calling it the conduct of war. This is part 2 of the war fighting discussion that we are having with our good friend, Colonel Oak McCulloch. Oak, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, Gordon. Good to see you.
It's great to see you as well. It's great to have you back. And we are, you and I both have, but we've been talking about this a bunch, and we're both really been looking forward to this for a while. So, so good to have you back. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last time we had you on, we looked at, let me pull it up, the FM1. I thought I had my screen shared, but I did not. The FM1 warfighting manual. That's this one right here from the U.S. Marine Corps. And we really ended up focusing. I think we decided right before the show that we were just going to do 2 episodes, because we ended up talking really mostly about chapter 2, the theory of war. And we kind of went through every section and went through the highlights. You had been kind enough to give me a copy of this book, which I've read multiple times, and it's a great book. I encourage people to pick it up and read it. It's a very short read, despite being I don't know, it's what, almost 100 pages, but it feels much shorter than that.
It's an easy read.
Very easy, very easy. And it all makes sense. It's very concise. There's not a lot of fluff in it. And tonight, what I really wanted to the framework for tonight, I think, is chapter 4, the conduct of war. Not to skip over preparing for war, because as Sun Tzu said, that's the most important part of any battle, is the preparation. But the conduct of war, I think, really gets into these levels of war that we discussed last time, because the 3 levels of war that we identified from chapter 2 were strategic, operational, and tactical. And as you explained to us, your experience when you were in the Army was really more at the operational and tactical level, which I think I could describe as boots on the ground. Is it fair to describe it that way?
Right. Yeah. Just as a quick reminder, the strategic level is what is it that we want to accomplish, the end result. The operational are the big steps you got to do to reach that. So like in the first Gulf War I was in, the strategic was to get Iraq out of Kuwait. The operational piece that they came up with was then destroy the Republican Guards. And then the tactical piece was the actual battles where we were doing that, destroying the Republican Guards and whoever else we ran into. Yeah. And then, like we were talking before the show, you could even add the grand strategy piece to that, which is even beyond warfare. I was talking about General Marshall during World War II. He was the American architect of World War II, basically. And he never fought in any battles in World War II. He didn't lead any troops besides what was at, the Department of War. But he was the one who was saying, okay, this is what we want to accomplish, but we also have to remember that, he kept the Army at 90 divisions. And he said that because we still got to man a Navy, we still got to man a Marine Corps, we still got to build tanks, ships, artillery pieces, not only for the American military, but for all our allies. We got to feed both our people, not only the soldiers, but people at home and the people in the other countries that we are supporting. So he that's the grand strategy. How do you put all those pieces together that includes the civilian world and the military world piece of it to reach your final goal?
Yeah. And I think the thing that we really hit on as we were reading through this, the reason that I wanted to have you on initially to discuss this manual is you had given this to me back in Deadwood, and I read through it and I was blown away at how relevant, despite the fact that this manual is written for kinetic warfare. I was blown away at how relevant it seemed to the information psychological battle space that I think all of us have witnessed and have become more and more familiar with. And so, to your point, organizing a military, organizing the troops so that they can be deployed in a meaningful way, according to the highest level strategy, makes a lot of sense. And then, I've just been thinking a lot about how that translates into the information battle space, because you had sent me the article about the RMA, the revolution in military action?
Military affairs.
Military affairs, revolution in military affairs, which I do want to get to and talk about, because I think that you're absolutely right that we are living through that. And all of it just seems very, very relevant. So I really look forward to this discussion and getting into it.
Yeah, I'm wherever you want to take us, Gordon.
Okay. Well, let's start by just looking at this chapter, because there's some great quotes here at the beginning. It's again, the conduct of war, chapter 4. It's the first is a quote from Sun Tzu. Now an army may be likened to water, for just as flowing water avoids the heights and hastens to the lowlands, so an army avoids strength and strikes weakness. And then another quote from Sun Tzu: speed is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness travel by unexpected routes, and strike him where he has taken no precautions. And that second quote, like I think about Donald Trump all the time when I read that second quote, because I feel like the way that he uses social media and the way that he talks about things, like he always is zigging when everyone's zagging. Everyone's always talking about this thing over here, and then he'll just come out of left field and start talking about something else and catches everybody off guard. And now all of a sudden the media has to run over here and start talking about this other thing and figure out how they're going to subvert whatever the messaging is, on his next deployment. And that's exactly how I feel like he uses the speed of warfare. And then I also think about what you always say. I feel like whenever you speak to us is, what is it? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and slow is smooth, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Right. Yeah. And those two quotes, I think obviously, I mean, we're still reading them. How long after he wrote them? The Germans certainly put those to use in coming up with Blitzkrieg. And that's what, the maneuver warfare that we use that came out of World War II, that we eventually in the 80s adopted maneuver warfare. Certainly we used the Blitzkrieg style and tactics and same principles that they used to come up with that. But, a lot of this stuff is timeless, and when we get to the revolution of military affairs, it isn't that we came up with a new way to do something. We came up with new organizations. We came up with new technology to actually change that the result of that Blitzkrieg, and we can go through all that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to give an example to people of some of the, like what I was alluding to earlier, and how this stuff becomes so relevant to information psychological battle space. So the first section of this chapter 4 is the challenge. And it says, the challenge is to identify and adopt a concept of warfighting consistent with our understanding of the nature and theory of war and the realities of the modern battlefield. What exactly does this require? It requires a concept of warfighting that will function effectively in an uncertain, chaotic, and fluid environment. In fact, one that will exploit these conditions to advantage. It requires a concept that, recognizing the time-competitive rhythm of war, generates and exploits superior tempo and velocity. It requires a concept that is consistently effective across the full spectrum of conflict. And let's see, skipping through just to these highlights. It requires a concept which takes into account the moral as well as the physical forces of war. It requires a concept with which we can succeed against a numerically superior foe because we can no longer presume a numerical advantage. I mean that makes me think a lot of the Frog Army, the Anons against the MSM, right? I mean, they had all the resources, they had all the numbers in terms of the reach and the coverage, and yet a bunch of degenerates and delinquents online were able to make a bunch of memes in 2016 and get Donald Trump elected.
Right.
So then
I'm sorry. Great point. And it is the full spectrum. And information and psychological operations have certainly. Is certainly part of that spectrum of warfare.
Yes. Yeah. And so it says, so now we get into maneuver warfare. And so we actually had you, this is the third time we've been on the show. The first time we had you on months ago, you came on and we just discussed maneuver warfare. And I think that's actually when you first mentioned this pamphlet to me, this manual. So we didn't, I don't think we actually went through this manual together, though we may have looked at some excerpts. So there are some highlights from here that I think are very relevant. So here it says the traditional understanding of maneuver is a spatial one. That is, we maneuver in space to gain a positional advantage. However, in order to maximize the usefulness of maneuver, we must consider maneuver in time as well. That is, we generate a faster operational tempo than the enemy to gain a temporal advantage. It is through maneuver in both dimensions that an inferior force can achieve decisive superiority at the necessary time and place. And then the quote here is, maneuver warfare is a warfighting philosophy that seeks to shatter the enemy's cohesion through a series of rapid, violent, and unexpected actions which create a turbulent and rapidly deteriorating situation with which he cannot cope. And, you know, when I read that, I really do think about morale and the psychology of it as much as the kinetic aspect. Like, even though this is written in the context of a kinetic warfighter, obviously they're speaking to the psychology and the morale of a defending force when you are attacking using maneuver warfare.
Yeah, like I a couple times, I think at GART we spoke, and the whole purpose of maneuver warfare is that you don't want to fight. You want to put them at such a disadvantage that they just give up, and we've seen that throughout history with maneuver warfare and Blitzkrieg and those kinds of things. That you know, if you get to the point where it just becomes untenable for them, and they realize that they have one of two choices: they either surrender or they fight to the death. Sometimes they choose fighting to the death, but the vast majority of people, if you give them that choice, they're going to surrender.
Yeah, and we've seen that happen. Actually, it feels like with President Trump, with some of his adversaries, not kinetic adversaries, but just the narrative adversaries. That seems like they bend the knee more often than not.
Right. And maybe not even that's the public persona, or it is the public persona. It may not be advertised that they're bending the knee, except for people like you and the people on Badlands media who bring that up. But for the regular public, it just looks like he out negotiated them, where in fact they didn't even have any chance in the negotiation, because he had put them at such a disadvantage that they only had one option.
Yeah, exactly. And so it expands on this a little bit. It says, from this definition, we see that the aim in maneuver warfare is to render the enemy incapable of resisting by shattering his moral and physical cohesion and his ability to fight as an effective, coordinated whole, rather than to destroy him physically through incremental attrition, which is generally more costly and time-consuming. Ideally, the components of his physical strength that remain are irrelevant because we have paralyzed his ability to use them effectively. Even if an outmaneuvered enemy continues to fight as individuals or small units, we can destroy the remnants with relative ease because we have eliminated his ability to fight effectively as a force. And, you know, that just makes me think of all of these entities, these institutions that remain ostensibly intact. The MSM being one of them, these government agencies, these large organizations, these NGOs that have clearly been an issue, a nefarious, malevolent force against the American people. And a lot of people are scratching their head saying, well, why do these things still even exist? You know, it seems like they really were in conflict with Trump during the first term. Why are they even still around? Why is Trump still going on Fox News? Why is Trump still participating in this stuff? And maybe it's just like, as it says right here, even though they can physically still be there, they're irrelevant because they have been paralyzed in their ability to be used effectively.
Yeah, if you chop the leadership away from them, where they can't they can't be coordinated, you know, that's when, and we can get into that with the American way of war, you know, and I think Trump certainly understands that. You know, one of the things that makes the American military so much more powerful than many other ones is that we don't just send our Air Force or our Navy or our Army. We send the whole group, you know, who have trained together, who understand how each operates and which one brings what strengths to cover what weaknesses, and not even the military. I mean, you know, when we deploy, we bring people from ATF, FBI, whatever we need, whatever agency we need on the ground to do the mission that we're going to do, that's who we bring. And it's that intermingle of all the parts together. The whole is much stronger than just the individual parts.
Yeah.
But if you chop off the leadership of all these organizations, these 3-letter agencies and NGOs, for the bad guys, they can't do that coordination together. And now they're just working individually, if they're even working at all. And now it's much easier, just like the FM1 said, it's much easier then to deal with those little parts than it is the whole that's all coordinated and under one control.
Yeah, and what you're getting at, I think, is the what they talk about in this next section, the philosophy of command, and that's what we talked about during the first time you came on, which I then extrapolated on stage in Plymouth, which is decentralizing your command, trusting your field commanders to go out there and do the job once they understand what the greater vision is. And so I definitely want to talk about that a little bit. But there's some really great.
That's how you get that speed. That's how, when you're talking about time, that's how you get to that point where it isn't just maneuvering on the ground. You're maneuvering faster than they can. Go back to the discussion we had last time, get inside their OODA loop, their decision-making process, so that when people on the ground can actually they have the authority to make decisions. They don't have to ask can I do this, because it's in line with the bigger intent. Then things go faster than if somebody on the ground has to radio back and wait for an answer. And that has certainly been a huge advantage for us in warfare. And I think that's, I saw a thing, I forget which one of the cabinet members were talking. Wasn't even a cabinet member. It was the guys who negotiated. I think it was on your show. Negotiated the peace deal in the Middle East. They said, I didn't have to go back and ask President Trump. He told me what he wanted to look like at the end, and this is your authority to make it happen. And they were on the ground. They were the ones who saw what was going on, had the feel for what was going on, and they just made decisions that needed to be made. And of course, they had to tell him what decisions they made, but they didn't have to ask permission, and that's what allows that speeding up of the maneuver piece of it, so that you can outthink and outmaneuver the enemy. And I think that they showed that very well, and they explained that very well on that clip you showed.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I was listening to Steve Wickoff and Jared Kushner on 60 Minutes explain to I think it was Leslie Stahl.
Leslie Stahl.
She was flabbergasted. She was like, "Wait a minute! Didn't you need permission to do this stuff? Like, didn't you need authority? Like, to go? Who gave you the authority to go meet face to face with Hamas?" And they were like, "I mean, President Trump gave us the authority, but he gave us the authority way back when, like before we left the United States. I didn't have to pick up the phone and call him and ask him. Like, he said, if you feel like you need to get in the room with them to make it happen, get in that room and make it happen." And so, they were able to
again, you just put that. A good commander, whether it's military or business or politician, whoever's in charge, if they can visualize what the end state is going to look like to the people who have to make it happen on the ground, then you don't have to come back and give them individual authority. You've given them the authority to get us to this end vision. Do what you need to do inside of parameters. I'm sure there were some parameters that they had, but inside those parameters, I don't care what you have to do to get us to that end state. Just make it happen.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I like to talk about on this show. When we talk about all these different characters, we haven't done the Steve Wickoff episode, but that'll definitely be an episode on the show. But we did do the Dennis Rodman one a few weeks ago with Cam. And one of the reasons that I think Dennis Rodman worked as an envoy to North Korea is because of the loyalty I think he had to the mission, like the loyalty he had to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump believed in him when nobody else would. Like everybody else had given up on the guy except for Donald Trump. And I think Trump recognized that the misfit personality of Dennis Rodman, there was like a natural like kindred spirit with Kim Jong-un, who's this other like isolated figure in, world politics and like world culture. And they have like this weird friendship now over this connection, because they're both like seen as these ostracized figures. Steve Witkoff's another example because of the way Donald Trump was there for him when his son died of a drug overdose. Right. Steve Witkoff has basically pledged his absolute loyalty and support to President Trump because President Trump was there for him when he needed him. Kanye West is another great example of somebody who is like absolutely loyal to Trump, no matter what Trump says, no matter what Trump does, even when there's that they may personally disagree with something that he is doing. They're gonna move forward with the mission because they believe in him, and they're not gonna betray him.
Well, I think again, they may disagree with little things along the way, but he does a great job of putting out that end vision, that the command mission intent command, where you say, this is what at the end of the day, this is what it needs to look like. So if you run into an obstacle, you figure out a way around the obstacle. You're on the ground, you got your eyes there, you know what's going on, you figure out a way around that obstacle and get us to the end state. And if you never hear from me again, you know where we have to be. And so I think he does a very good job of that with the people who trust him and who he trusts. And he gives them the authority to do the things that they have to do inside the parameters that he gives them.
Yeah. I mean, Jared Kushner, like another example. I mean, obviously he's his son-in-law, married to his daughter. They have children together. I mean, they're family. But when Jared Kushner in 2008, when he was running his father's company because his father was in prison, thanks to Chris Christie, and he was facing bankruptcy because of the real estate financial crisis. It was Donald Trump who picked up the phone and called Tom Barrack, and Tom Barrack, who another one of these old trusted friends of Donald Trump. He said my daughter's, I guess, was boyfriend or husband at the time, whichever one it was, really needs help. Please, what can you do? And Tom Barrack worked his contacts and came up with the Qataris, and the Qataris stepped up and bought out these failing properties where he was upside down in the mortgage and saved Jared Kushner from financial insolvency. You got to think that, number one, Jared Kushner, on top of it being his father-in-law, is just like trust Donald Trump's judgment, because he was able to really help him in a pinch. And then the Qataris as well. There's like this relationship between the Qataris and Kushner because of that that moment that was almost 20 years ago. And now it all kind of comes full circle with the Abraham Accords, and now, of course, this Middle East peace process that we're seeing play out. So again, I think like you said, it's just people trusting the commander, trusting the vision, and the commander trusting them to go out and achieve that vision, however they need to. There's some a few more great quotes that I want to run through from this maneuver warfare section, because again, this is just powerful stuff that's good for people to hear. Again, the context is a kinetic battle, but it says the greatest value of firepower. And if you think of firepower as like, I think of that as like narrative firepower. The greatest value of firepower is not physical destruction, the cumulative effects of which are felt only slowly, but the moral dislocation it causes. So even in a kinetic context of like actually firing artillery at somebody, they're saying that the greatest value is not physically destroying somebody, but actually the cumulative effects of the moral dislocation that striking them causes. And then it says, by our actions.
Yeah, you don't have to kill them. You just have to get. Yeah, you don't have to kill them. You just have to get them to where they don't want to kill you. Or if you want to take it to the information, you don't have to destroy them. You just have to get it so that the public doesn't believe them anymore. but things like that. So, I mean, it certainly has implication across the board, both kinetic and non-kinetic.
Yeah. This next paragraph says if the aim of maneuver warfare is to shatter the enemy's cohesion, the immediate object toward that end is to create a situation in which he cannot function. By our actions, we seek to pose menacing dilemmas in which events happen unexpectedly and faster than the enemy can keep up with them. The enemy must be made to see his situation not only as deteriorating, but deteriorating at an ever-increasing rate. The ultimate goal is panic and paralysis, an enemy who has lost the ability to resist. And when I look at like the Democrats, I look at even like the Republican establishment, I look at these people like the domestic enemies of Donald Trump, I would say, the people that he is engaging constantly in narrative warfare with, the way that they've been acting the past few weeks and months. That last sentence, I think, speaks directly to that. The ultimate goal is panic and paralysis, an enemy who has lost the ability to resist. Through the use of greater tempo and velocity, we seek to establish a pace that the enemy cannot maintain, so that with each action, his reactions are increasingly late until eventually he is overcome by events. That, of course, is a perfect summation of Donald Trump's narrative warfare campaign. And then this longer section right here. We concentrate strength against critical enemy vulnerabilities, striking quickly and boldly where, when, and how it will cause the greatest damage to our enemy's ability to fight. Once gained or found, any advantage must be pressed relentlessly and unhesitatingly. We must be ruthlessly opportunistic, actively seeking out signs of weakness against which we will direct all of available combat power. And when the decisive opportunity arrives, we must exploit it fully and aggressively, committing every ounce of combat power we can muster and pushing ourselves to the limits of exhaustion. In order to appear unpredictable, we must avoid set rules and patterns which inhibit imagination and initiative. In order to appear ambiguous and threatening, we should operate on axes that offer several courses of action, keeping the enemy unclear as to which we will choose. So that, again, like I only think about narrative warfare when I'm reading through this now.
Yeah, I think it applies as well, you know. And one of the things that my 1st Battalion commander, who was kind of the one who introduced us to this manual and to maneuver warfare, he used to say, you know, surprise has a time limit. If you surprise somebody and you let them rest, they regain their composure, and now you just wasted that amount of time. So that's the piece that you just got to keep at it. You got to keep at it. Keep presenting them with. The other thing he used to say is when you were talking about coming at them from different angles, is put them on the horns of dilemma. Not one horn, but many horns, where, you know, they don't know which one it is that's going to get them, but there's 3 or 4 ways to do it, and they have to prepare for all of them, which spreads them out and weakens their response to whatever it is that you finally decide to do. And I think President Trump does a great job with that. And I think that's part of those things. He throws things out there just to see where a situation is, you know, because a absolute must is you reinforce success. You don't reinforce failure. And so he wants to see where those cracks are so he can figure out, get a success, and then reinforce that to drive that crack even wider and wider and wider, to get them into the point where they can't make decisions fast enough to fill it.
Yeah, that feedback loop that Chris Paul talks about, which I think he's spot on when he says that. When he says that Trump will just say things that he doesn't necessarily maybe believe. He's just trying to gauge what's the reaction when I say these things. What's the reaction when I say, oh yeah, the H-1B1 visas? Yeah, of course we're going to bring people over from India to replace all these American workers, and then the entire MAGA base is up in arms, hair on fire, and before you know it, Vivek Ramaswamy is no longer in the administration, and I haven't even heard of him in months. So that's a good example of that.
Well, I think he also puts things out there just to make the enemy, whoever that is, whoever he is targeting at that moment, to again putting them on a horn of a dilemma. I mean, they even if he doesn't do it, they got to at least prepare for that, which again depletes their effort from where he really wants to go, or he finally decides to go. He's now, you got your strength against his weakness, a weaker part of him than it would have been if he hadn't had to prepare for all those other things that you threw out there. Even if you never plan on doing it, it goes back to the feint and demonstration piece that we talked about last time. I think he does a lot of things and demonstrations to keep the enemy where he wants them, or to take them down a road that he wants them to go, that he has no intentions of confronting them on that road. He just wants them to use resources, time, money, people, all that planning effort on a road that he doesn't have any intentions of going to.
Yeah, the horns of dilemma. I like that. I'm gonna use that. The horns of dilemma.
Yeah.
So let me see. I want to jump to shaping the battlefield, because I feel like the philosophy of command we kind of covered with the whole Steve Wickoff thing, but shaping the battle is this is one that really stuck out to me in terms of just the titling of this, because I feel like this is a lot of what Sun Tzu talks about when he's talking about winning a battle before the battle begins, your ability to prepare for the infinite number of scenarios you might run into, and being able to deal with them in the most efficient and effective way so that you can shape the battle to unfold the way you want it to unfold, as opposed to reacting to it constantly and being basically in the defensive as opposed to the offensive. I don't know what your thoughts are on this. If you have any specific thoughts in this section, I have a few highlights, which does not look like they carried over, but
Well, I think you got it exactly right. You want to always be on the offensive, and that's what maneuver warfare is. It is us taking the offensive, and we really came up. What really cemented the concept and the push for the American military to go toward maneuver warfare, because before that, we were absolutely a defensive army in Europe. Our plan was to dig in and let the Soviets attack us, and we would defend and fall back and defend, along the way. But it was the Arab-Israeli War in 1973 that really convinced the American military, the leaders, that we needed an offensive mindset. And in particular, one of the battles was the Battle of the Golan Heights, where that was completely a defensive battle, and they were the ones that were always on those horns of dilemmas. And Kahalani, the battalion commander, had to go from crisis to crisis to crisis. Sometimes he'd have 2 or 3 crises going on at the same time, and he had to decide which one he actually had to deal with. And those battles, the Golan Heights and up to the crossing the river or the Suez Canal, those were the things that finally pushed the American military to go to an offensive mindset. That and the developing the key weapon systems that allowed us to do that: the M1 tank, the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, the Apache, the MLRS rocket systems, those kinds of things that allowed us to make that move from a defensive to an offensive posture.
Yeah, and you had mentioned before with organizing the army into 90 divisions in World War II, but before the show, when we were talking, you talked about the Germans spent a while throughout World War II trial and error, just working on their tank divisions and getting the right ratio of tanks with infantry, and what were these combined arms units, and how do they work together the most effectively, so that you have the perfect ratio of boots on the ground with mechanized units.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even before World War II, when they were first developing the concept of Blitzkrieg, when they were developing that in the Soviet Union, secret bases in the Soviet Union, because they weren't allowed to have tanks, so they were hiding it. They were still going through all that process of trying to figure out what was the right mix. Because an RMA, a Revolution in Military Affairs, even the concept of a tank doesn't mean anything if you don't have the personnel set up to do it right, and the training and the doctrine to make it work. Just a tank by itself, and I think that's part of the problem you're seeing in Ukraine with the Ukrainian army, is we're giving them all kinds of great weapon systems, not only us, the West, but they're not set up. They haven't trained on them. They don't know how to use them in a combined arms fashion. So an M1 tank just by itself is not nearly as powerful as an M1 tank in an armor division with 8 armored personnel carriers and the right amount of artillery and the right amount of rocket artillery and close air support, whether that's helicopters or planes. It's that combined arms piece and the right mixture of each that makes it lethal, not just the tank, or not just the artillery, or not just the Apache helicopter.
Yeah, I recall in last year, 2024, writing an article for the news brief about the Ukrainians using the M1 as a pillbox, meaning that it was just totally stationary, and that's just not the right way to use a tank in a modern battlefield. When you have drones, when a drone can fly in, a very cheap drone can fly in and kill everybody in the tank, sitting there stationary waiting for somebody to come ambush, that you could ambush, and then a drone can come in from behind. You don't even see the drone coming, and you're dead. And that was happening over and over and over to them, to the extent that they had to pull all the M1s like off the battlefield because they were losing them so quickly. And on to that point,
not just the M1, other modern tanks as well.
Yeah, so that actually might be a good transition, because I do want to talk about the RMA. So maybe we'll transition to the RMA for a bit, and then we can come back and wrap up with a few more of these sections from the FMFM1 manual. But before we do, I thought this was interesting. Well, let's do a ad break, and then we'll come back, and I'll show you the audience this armor, the anti-drone armor that you and I were looking at before the show. All right, so let's get a word from. Start with Gart.
Here on the sun-kissed shores of Cocoa Beach, where the ocean meets the horizon, the Great American Restoration Tour continues on November 6th through the 9th, 2025. Badlands Media gathers patriots like you, not just to talk, but to rebuild. From truth-telling panels to unbreakable bonds, we're restoring the soul of our nation, one conversation at a time. This is the heart of the Space Coast, where the rockets defy gravity and dreams touch the stars. Feel the thunder of innovation that powers America forward. Together, we're not just healing the past, we're blasting off into a brighter tomorrow, a future where truth prevails, families thrive, and America leads once more. Join us in Cocoa Beach. Get your seat or your virtual stream pass now at badlandsmedia.tv/events. Launch is imminent, and you don't want to miss this liftoff.
What is the Sovereign Alliance? The Sovereign Alliance are a collection of leaders and countries that are aligned not in the vision for their countries, but against a vision that has been thrust upon them. I believe that the Sovereign Alliance is less a battle for something and more a battle against something. They are against globalism, collectivism, They are against the rules-based international order.
Sovereign Alliance, the latest addition to Badlands Rise merch, available now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
Saw your note. Hopefully the sound was playing on those. But those are pre-produced. So, but I thought that the second one was relevant. The Rise of Tire was very relevant because of the nature of what we're discussing. And so what we've seen develop, because right now we're going through an RMA. So we're going to talk about what an RMA is, but just to kind of set the stage so people understand what we're talking about, this revolution in military affairs. Right now, there's been this this laboratories that they're calling it. The Ukrainian battlefield is a laboratory because you have these new technologies that are coming in, these drones that are very cheap to make, and you arm them with an explosive, and they're very small and they're very fast, and they can fly in to the window of a vehicle and kill everybody in the vehicle, or they can fly up to a group of guys who are huddled around talking, coming up with a plan, and just kill everybody in the huddle. And then you have up against these multi-million-dollar tanks that are very expensive and very hard to build and difficult to maintain, expensive to maintain. And these drones can swarm the tank and destroy it. So the Russians and Ukrainians have been developing, really more of the Russians because they're the ones who actually have the tanks. They've been developing this anti-drone armor. So here's a few examples of like the preliminary, like the early versions of what was coming up, was pretty much just taking chain link fence and putting it around the tank. But then you start getting like the ones that I've been seeing is this hedgehog armor. And it's where they take rebar, like construction rebar, and they just tie it together and they just stick it out of every orifice that the tank has. And so the tank ends up just having like spikes coming out of every side of it. And the idea is that the rebar, the drone runs into the rebar before it reaches the tank. It explodes a few feet away from the tank, and the tank armor protects the crew from the explosion. But I've seen pictures of some of these tanks where they literally, it just looks like a giant, it looks like Cousin It or something, just like some sort of a monster from a monster movie going across a field. It doesn't even look like a tank anymore. And some of these pieces of rebar are like, I've seen like 25 feet long because they're trying to kill the drone, as far away from the tank as they can. It's pretty interesting. But I'm sure once this war is over, they'll spend years evaluating all the data, and they'll come up with something even more sophisticated than just rebar and chain link fence to stop these drones.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, on the battlefield, as you're fighting and people are dying and vehicles are being lost, you come up with it as expedient methods as you can, whatever works. And like you said, then as we have time and resources and energy to dedicate to looking at a better solution, long-term solution to whatever it is that caused the issue, then you that's where you make the for the next war or beyond. But when you're on the battlefield, you do whatever you can come up with to eliminate that advantage that somebody has.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so let's talk about this, because this is something that you and I have been discussing offline, and it's really, really relevant to this moment for a number of reasons. I think it's relevant to the kinetic battlefield, like we just saw, but then also, of course, this narrative, information, psychological battlefield that has become more of a more prevalent, and more participation from military and non-military participants. So what is a revolution in military affairs? It says a revolution in military affairs, RMA, refers to a hypothesis in military theory suggesting that certain periods in history have seen fundamental changes in warfare due to new technologies, doctrines, strategies, and tactics, leading to an irrevocable shift in how conflicts are conducted. And so I thought, I think you had a lot of examples that you had thought of. So maybe rather than reading through their examples, if you wanted to walk us through some of the examples that you had thought of, that are.
Yeah,
that are
I think that's a great definition of an RMA. And I think, again, you got to go back to the difference between an evolution and a revolution. An evolution is you got a tank, and you design it to go a little bit faster or shoot a little bit further. That's not a revolution. That is an evolution in that same weapon being used the same way. The revolution is that you take that weapon, you make increases in its lethality, and then you figure out a new way to use that weapon. And RMAs are nothing new. I mean, the Russians were actually the ones that came up with that term, if I remember correctly. In the 30s is when they came up with it. But it's nothing new. I mean, RMAs have been going on for centuries. I mean, in the 14th and 17th century, it was the use of gunpowder was the first real big RMA. If in the modern time, if you want to call the 14th and through 17th century modern time, which it certainly was, probably warfare wise, both on land and naval. I mean, one of the reasons that the West became the dominant power was because they could put more guns. They designed a ship that could handle more guns than the ships from Asia or Africa or anywhere else. So then in the 17th century, after the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, 1649, that was when nation states became in being. Before that, it was the Holy Roman Empire owned everything, or it was
kingdoms, right?
Vast, right. It's when monarchs from a specific country then took charge of their military, took charge of their affairs in their country. And so that was, and developed military installations and standing armies and those kinds of things that they really didn't have before that. Then move to the 18th, 19th century. Of course, you got the French Revolution and Napoleonic warfare, which really was the beginning of large standing armies. He just conscripted everybody and really threw the battlefield off kilter, because no country had ever done that, could put that many soldiers on the battlefield at one time. And then industrialization came along, which then, railroads, steam engines, rifled guns, machine guns, long-range artillery, iron ships, battleships and things like that, which completely changed the face of the battlefield. Cavalry went away with barbed wire and machine guns. Couldn't do that anymore. Mass infantry assaults went away because of those type of things. Then you go to 20th century, mechanization of in between the two world wars really changed battlefield, and that's where Blitzkrieg, the concept of Blitzkrieg, came along from the Germans. But then you take into account some of our aircraft carriers and carrier aviation, amphibious warfare. We're talking about the FM1, which is the Fleet Marine Field Manual 1 for the Marine Corps. They spent a lot of time in between the wars figuring out how to do amphibious landings, what type of landing craft, what were going to be the tactics, what was the organization of the forces that were going to make the landing. The strategic bombing really changed the way we fight wars, not only on the battlefield, but in the civilian world as well. And then eventually we got to nuclear weapons and now space age weapons. And so, that nothing new. But the thing that I always tell people is this, that every time an RMA happens, then immediately the other side is trying to come up with, number one, a counter to it to level the playing field again, or the battlefield, or whatever warfare we're talking about. And then the thing that I always used to throw out to people is, can we generate an RMA on purpose. And, with thinking about what technology we have, how we can put that into a weapon system, man it, come up with a doctrine, and put it to use on the battlefield before somebody else does. And I think if you're thinking along that lines, the 4 areas that I think absolutely could be RMAs in the future, and not too far future, long range precision strike. Our aircraft carriers are a thing of the past. Maybe I don't believe that. I think there'll always be a place for aircraft carriers, but will it be the dominant thing? Still in the ocean. Before they came along, it was battleships. And if you told somebody in the 1930s that the battleships were going to be obsolete, or that the aircraft carrier was going to be the main part of a fleet, they would have laughed at you. So I think there's always use for those, but they just won't be the centerpiece of the doctrine, philosophy, force on the ground. And I think long-range precision missiles, whether it's cruise missiles or hypersonic missiles or any of those, are certainly changing the face of the battlefield out there. And in information war, which you guys here on Badlands Media talk about all the time, I think that certainly it is an RMA that's going on. I don't think we realize how much it's changed the battlefield, the battle space, not just field, the battle space that everybody is operating in. I don't think people understand quite as much. Maybe you guys on Badlands Media do, but the average person, I don't think, understands that. And then dominating maneuver is always going to be one. Can we get things to a place faster? General Klaus talks about getting people from one space to another anywhere in the world in 45 minutes. If that was actually possible at some point, or even double that in an hour and a half, that is dominating maneuver, that you can take a force and move it from one place to another much faster than the other can react. And that's kind of the thought of maneuver warfare and Blitzkrieg and maneuver warfare and those things. But dominating maneuver is one of those that I think we could possibly see in the future. And then the last one is space warfare, and I think that's coming. I mean, like we said before, if you think that countries aren't, if they haven't already armed things in space, if you don't think they're figuring out how to do that, then you're pretty naive.
Yeah. I mean, they're already talking about Navy ships, like there are videos out now of these Navy ships that have like lasers that are like lethal lasers, and that kind of technology. And then I've heard for years, I've heard about these rail guns, that are like, I guess they're magnetized. It's like magnets that launch a projectile, so that they don't use like combustion. It's just a magnet that runs down a rail, and then it launches a projectile at like hypersonic speed using a magnet. And you think about that could be transitioned. You got to think that's being developed on a terrestrial battlefield, so it can be used in space, because in space you can't blow things up, but you can certainly use a magnet to launch something at a really, really high speed at something else. And
it doesn't even have to be a big projectile if it's moving fast enough. That's the whole beauty of a rail gun, is you could take just a regular bullet basically and destroy an M1 tank with it if it's moving fast enough.
Yeah. And you said before, you talked before about like reacting and trying to like beat the RMA, but historically, a lot of times, and I've heard General Klaus talk about this too, that people get stuck in the old way of thinking, and they don't. I forget who that Air Force general was, or that general rather, the Army general who said in World War I that airplanes are cute toys, but they'll never have any sort of military application, right?
Well, the problem we run into is we get into this mindset, and the military is very guilty of this. We're preparing for the next war with what we had last war, with the same doctrine, the same philosophy, the same equipment, maybe a little bit improved, but we're not looking beyond what we have and what's coming down the road. And I think we fall into that in all kinds of areas, not just in combat or in the military. I think we do that everywhere, where we just can't think beyond what we know and what we, and I'm guilty of that. I mean, you know, Kel has told me numerous times that I am guilty of that, where I just can't get past some of the things that I grew up using in the military that worked, that may not work in the future. And I'm trying to get better at that, but that's a hard one to overcome. It really is.
We all get stuck in our ways. I mean, my wife says the same thing about me. So we're all guilty, even when you're not in the military, you still get stuck in your ways. But another example that comes to mind is the Civil War. The Civil War, as I understand it, I remember learning it in college that the reason that they used the wool, that they had the wool uniforms, is because that went back to the Napoleonic era, that the French were using wool uniforms. So hell, you know, that's what we're going to use, because the best army in the world, the French, they use the wool uniforms. So we're going to use wool uniforms too, even though you were fighting in Virginia in the summer, which is like 100 degrees with 100% humidity, and guys are just dropping dead of like heat exhaustion wearing a wool uniform in the summer. And they were like using all these old tactics, even though they had ironclad ships and machine guns and explosives. And so the Civil War was
lots of times.
Yeah.
Lots of times, you know, there are glimpses at what's coming and we just ignore them. You know, the wars in Europe should have told the American generals, you can't fight the way that we used to fight. With machine gun, with rifles, rifled rifles, where the barrel is rifled, so you can shoot further, more accurate. So you can't march in a straight line because of artillery, all those things that and eventually machine guns. That if we had paid attention to what was going on in Europe in the Austria-Prussian War, we would have realized that the tactics we were using were outdated, and that the equipment that was being used made our tactics obsolete. But
that was when
nobody paid attention to that.
I was sorry. Finish your thought.
Yeah. Yep.
That was when von Moltke, developed the maneuver warfare doctrine, right? Von Moltke was developing maneuver warfare using railroads to move troops around for the Prussians, and that was where like moving troops very quickly to surround an enemy location, then cut off their communications, cut off their supply line, and then just use attrition warfare to force them to surrender.
Yeah, absolutely. He was working with interior lines, and he would use a demonstration or a feint to hold some part in place until he could move enough soldiers fast enough to deal with another section. And then once he had dealt with them, he got them back to where they had to be before they could realize that sector that they thought was heavily defended was very lightly defended. And by the time they attacked, he had his soldiers back in place to defend it. So, yeah, I mean, we need to pay attention to what's going on, not only on the battlefield, but in politics and in every facet of our life, because lots of times there is a glimpse that we're being shown that we're just ignoring, or we're wishing away, that is telling us what's coming down the road.
Yeah. And a lot of this, I think we are getting those glimpses right now when we see these peace deals that Donald Trump is signing. Another one was just signed today or yesterday. The Cambodia, the one in Cambodia. Trump's over there in Asia, and you're seeing, I think, a lot of narrative being used to advance in the minds of people this idea that a conflict has escalated tremendously. And maybe in some situations it has escalated tremendously, but maybe in other situations it hasn't as much. The South America thing comes to mind. I mean, we need to see how that plays out, but from what I have gathered, there's a lot less actual kinetic activity happening there, and there's just more of like arrests. I've seen a lot of arrests of cartel leaders, cartel members being extradited to America. Yet we're being told that all this craziness is happening. There's military units moving around. There's ships moving around. You know, there are drug submarines being shot out of the water. But is a lot of that just narrative, or is it actually kinetic? I don't know. But the glimpse that I'm seeing is that maybe you can kind of circumvent a lot of this kinetic war fighting with narrative if you can accelerate the narrative very quickly and not let it fall into a kinetic conflict.
Well, you know, whether or not he's blowing up ships in the Caribbean or not, the message is that he is. So if you can make the enemy believe that if I take this ship out in the Caribbean, that they're going to sink me, they don't take the ship out there. So again, using the maneuver warfare piece, getting inside their mind so that they give up before that you have to kill them, because it costs more money, more time, more resources to kill them than to actually prevent them from fighting in the first place. And, you know, we just sent the largest aircraft carrier in the world, the Gerald Ford, off the coast of Colombia and Venezuela. Does that mean it has to be for kinetic reasons? No, there's all kinds of things on that ship that may be the reason that they're there. You know, radio transmission, so they can listen to radio transmissions. They can decode messages. Whatever it is that ship has on it, it isn't just aircraft to go blow stuff up. It is a complete tool that has all those pieces on it that can be used however they determine to use them. Yeah.
And again, it's, you know, I'm just fascinated by all this because not to get too like off topic here, but you know, when Trump flew to Asia, where he is right now, he stopped off in Qatar to refuel, and the Qatari Emir, for the first time ever, comes to the airport, gets on the Air Force One, and has like this little friendly powwow with President Trump while they're refueling the plane, and they film the whole thing and put it on television. Come to find out that Qatar has actually been hosting these meetings between the Colombian government and the Gulf Clan, which is the largest cartel, a cocaine cartel operating in Colombia. It turns out that they've actually been killing and arresting thousands of these guys for the past 11 months, I've learned. And for the past 4 weeks, they've been meeting in Qatar to negotiate not only the surrender of the Gulf Clan, but the disbandment and the cessation of their operations. They actually negotiated like a ceasefire back in April. So it's very strange that the Middle East is being used as like the conference room to negotiate the disbandment of the cocaine cartels in Colombia. But that is exactly what I'm seeing, like from a narrative, and like the receipts are all there. Meanwhile, we're sanctioning the Colombian president and accusing him of being the leader of the cartels. But it turns out he actually is the one who's arresting the cartels, it seems. Same with Maduro. So we'll see what actually plays out there. And we're definitely going to do a Book of Trump episode on them. But again, to your point, that's kind of a glimpse of what we're seeing. We're getting these little glimpses of like, all right, narrative warfare. You can tell a story. You know, now we're really getting into Burning Bright territory here, but you can tell a story and use the story of a war to sell the idea that these people need to surrender before we have to kill them all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is the whole premise of maneuver warfare, is to not have to fight the enemy to the death, because that doesn't help either side. I don't care how good your army is. When you get into kinetic warfare, good people are going to die. It happens. So the whole goal is to outmaneuver them, put them on those horns of dilemma, make them believe that they are at a point where they cannot resist, any further, and then they'll surrender or they'll negotiate. If they don't surrender, at least they'll negotiate, and you can get what you want out of it. If you're talking about information warfare and not necessarily warfare on the ground, but you're right. It's fascinating that now the Middle East is kind of like the center of all of this stuff that's going on, and you kind of foretold that a while ago in all of your writings and bringing all that up. But they really are becoming like the epicenter of everybody's going to them either for help or to bring people together in a neutral place. Because you certainly couldn't hold the negotiation in South America or Central America, and they're not coming to North America to do it. So where are you going to do it? You're not going to do it in Europe. So I think the Middle East was the perfect place to do that. And we'll see where that narrative goes.
Yeah, that, and it also helps having trillions and trillions of dollars of oil money that they're now looking to divest. They're divest. I think Saudi Arabia has reported that they're now down to, I think, like 63% dependency, like 63% of their annual budget for their government now comes from oil, whereas I think a year ago it was at 85%. So they're like very quickly moving, like divesting out of oil and becoming less and less dependent on the oil revenue to fund their economy and fund their government. But they also, so they're basically saying, hey, we have this money that we're looking to invest. How can we invest it in your government? How can we invest it in your economy? Let's come make a deal. And so nobody wants to screw with those guys because they want their money.
Yeah. Well, and again, could that be the result of the narrative that President Trump is putting out, that we are going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to have so much oil that we can give it away, basically give it away, or at such a low price that nobody needs the Middle East anymore. So maybe that is part of the narrative to get them to divest and use their funds in other good ways. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you guys are much smarter than me on that, but that certainly I would not put that past President Trump.
Yes. I think that's probably something where like a come to Jesus moment where he's helping them understand that there's a finite monopoly that OPEC has on oil, and even oil. It seems they recognize that oil isn't even going to be the thing for that much longer, because that now they're going to build nuclear power plants in the Middle East, and I believe it's the UAE and Saudi are both investing heavily in solar, and they're using like the Arabian Desert as like a laboratory to develop solar, because they recognize that solar has a lot of applications in space. And so to develop a technology, it makes sense to go to a dry, arid place that's always sunny. You don't have to worry about, you shouldn't be developing solar technology in Britain. You should be, or Seattle. You should be developing it in the Middle East. And finally, the UAE is spending billions of dollars developing data banks. And I would be remiss if we're talking about the future of warfare. I'm going to get yelled at a lot by G Money if I don't bring up Bitcoin. And it seems that Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the UAE, is very, very personally invested and interested in Bitcoin. And they are developing these massive, as I understand it, they're like cities basically, but they're just data banks. They're giant data banks that are like the size of cities, and probably to mine Bitcoin. That's probably, I mean, that's what I think G Money speculates that. I probably would agree with him on that. So that could be, like the future of warfare, the economic facet, future of warfare. So,
well, and just the information piece. I mean, to be able to gather the data, analyze the data, put it into some useful intelligence and get it out. That's all part of the data collection part as well, I think. And we're better than the Middle East, where it just has miles and miles, hundreds and thousands of miles of just nothing but desert. There's nobody that lives there. You can't grow anything there. You can't, besides getting oil out of the ground, it's just desert, just sand. So we're better than to put these data centers, to put these solar panels, to put all this new ideas and new technology. Like you said, if nothing else, just to develop it. Just it's a good place to see what, if it's viable, and how to let it evolve into what it could be going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so because we got about 15 minutes left, before we get out of here, there are a few, I want to go back to the FMFM1 manual and just hit a few of these sections that we didn't talk about. We ended up, I think, actually covering pretty much the entire chapter just through the course of our discussion with the RMAs. But I just want to share some of these quotes. So with shaping the battle, the first requirement is to establish our intent, what we want to accomplish, and how. We must shape the battle to our advantage in terms of both time and space. To shape the battle, we must project our thoughts forward in time and space. We must not become slaves to a plan. Rather, we attempt to shape the general conditions of war. We try to achieve a certain measure of ordered disorder. Examples include canalizing enemy movement in a desired direction, blocking or delaying enemy reinforcements so that we can fight a piecemeal enemy rather than a concentrated one, shaping enemy expectations through deception so we can exploit those expectations, or attacking a specific enemy capability to allow us to maximize a capability of our own, such as launching a campaign to destroy his air defenses so that we can maximize the use of our own aviation. And that entire sentence, very long sentence, reminds me of Sun Tzu saying, sometimes it's better not to try to annihilate an enemy when you have him cornered, because you will end up annihilating yourself trying to annihilate him. Sometimes it's better to give him a very narrow passage to escape, and then you can choose while he's escaping whether it makes sense to ambush him or to negotiate a peace and let him leave. But if the enemy feels like he truly is cornered in an existential moment, he will dig in like 300 style, like the Greeks at Thermopylae, and just fight to the last man. And good luck trying to annihilate an enemy who's prepared to, where every man in there is as resigned to his own death. You're going to end up, destroying yourself in the process.
Yeah, I agree.
And then there is decision making. This was a really interesting section, and I think with decision making, the biggest one there was this one. A military decision is not merely a mathematical computation. Decision making requires both the intuitive skill to recognize and analyze the essence of a given problem and the creative ability to devise a practical solution. This ability is the product of experience, education, intelligence, boldness, perception, and character. And I think a lot of the the creative negotiations that we've seen President Trump and his team come up with to resolve a lot of these ongoing conflicts around the world. We should base our decisions on awareness rather than on mechanical habit. That is, we act on a keen appreciation for the essential factors that make each situation unique instead of from conditioned response. And then this is the most important part. I think we must have the moral courage to make tough decisions in the face of uncertainty and accept full responsibility for those decisions when the natural inclination would be to postpone the decision pending more complete information. To delay action in an emergency because of incomplete information shows a lack of moral courage. We do not want to make rash decisions, but we must not squander opportunities while trying to gain more information. I think of the information narrative battle space. We're trying to make sense of something, of a situation where we don't have all the data. And frankly, we probably are never going to have all the data. There's probably certain things that are happening that may never be fully disclosed. I mean, John Harold speculates that devolution will never be disclosed publicly, and he might be right. But if that's the case, then we just have to we as the public, as one half of this coalition to retake our country, we have to make a decision and decisions based on the information that we do know, and kind of fill in the gaps on what we don't know for sure, and just make that decision to move forward. We can't just sit around and wait forever to be told that the country's been saved. At some point, we got to go take the bunker, and the bunker's sitting right there.
Yeah, I think this has applications in, you name it. I mean, I used to teach it when I was in the Army, decision making. I talk about it in my leadership talk when I talk to CEOs, CFOs, presidents, whoever, about in the business world. And the thing I always emphasize, you are never going to have all the information that you want to make a decision. That place is called fantasy land. It doesn't exist. Okay. You're never going to have all the information you want. But you know what you know. You probably got a pretty good idea of what you don't know. You can make an educated guess at that, and then make the decision and start down that road. You can always make detours. You can change the decision, whatever, as more information becomes available or the situation changes. But you got to start down that road. One of my favorite quotes of all times, and I use it all the time, is Teddy Roosevelt's quote. Anytime you got to make a decision, there's three options. You make the right decision, that's always the best option. You make the wrong decision, that's always the second best option. You don't make a decision, that's always the worst decision. Always. It's always the worst option, because not making a decision is making a decision. It's just not a good one.
Yeah, it's just inaction, right? This section mission.
And that's how you become overcome by events.
Yeah. Very, very true. Very true. This mission tactics, we can just touch on these three quotes. This speaks directly to what we were talking about with Jared Kushner and Steve Wickoff earlier. But it says, mission tactics are just as the name implies, but tactic of assigning a subordinate mission without specifying how the mission must be accomplished. The subordinate can adapt his actions to the changing situation. He informs his commander what he has done, but he does not wait for permission. So when the opportunity arises to go meet with Hamas face-to-face to negotiate peace, they made very clear to Leslie Stahl, we checked in with President Trump to let him know that we were meeting with Hamas, but we didn't, wait for somebody to tell us, go meet with Hamas to go negotiate the peace. And this last line I just thought was interesting, and this is one of the things that you highlighted as well. But we seek unity not through imposed control, but through harmonious initiative and lateral coordination. And that just kind of makes me think of.
Yeah, well, I always go back to this, Gordon. If you don't operate under this as a leader, and pick whatever profession you want, it doesn't matter whether it's the military, politics, business, whatever you want to pick. If you don't operate under that method, then you are making all the decisions. And so we're only using your knowledge, your skills, your abilities to make decisions and to make things happen. If you allow subordinate, however, junior leaders, however you want to define that, if you allow them to make decisions, because they're the ones on the ground seeing what's happening in the environment, then you are allowing them to use their knowledge, their skills, their abilities. And so now it's that whole thing that the sum is much greater than the individual parts. And so that's where creativity happens. When you give them the authority, you give them the vision, you give them the parameters, you give them the authority to make it happen, and then you let them do it. If you come up to an obstacle, figure out a way around it. You don't have to ask me how or if I can do it. You know what the vision looks like, what the intent is at the end. You figure out a way to get there. However, up, over, around, under, through, I don't care. Whatever you think is best on the ground, seeing what's going on.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And that is exactly how that whole interview, I think, with Leslie Stahl seemed to play out.
Oh, it was obvious. That was absolutely. They were using mission intent. Absolutely. that was so obvious to me. That's the first thing that popped in my mind.
Yeah. And so that this section, Commander's Intent, I think we've adequately addressed and summarized that. The focus of effort is kind of what you were getting at there. This is how I will achieve a decision. Everything else is secondary. But these last two sections are the ones that I wanted to touch on before we hit the rants and shut this down. And that was surfaces and gaps. Put simply, surfaces are hard spots, enemy strengths, and gaps are soft spots, enemy weaknesses. We avoid enemy strength and focus our efforts against enemy weakness, since pitting strength against weakness reduces casualties and is more likely to yield decisive results. Whenever possible, we exploit existing gaps. Failing that, we create gaps. Gaps may, in fact, be physical gaps in the enemy's dispositions, but they may also be any weaknesses in time or space, a moment in time when the enemy is overexposed and vulnerable, a seam in an air defense umbrella, an infantry unit caught unprepared in open terrain, or a boundary between two units. Similarly, a surface may be an actual strong point, or it may be any enemy strength, a moment when the enemy is just replenished and consolidated his position, or an integrated air defense system. An appreciation for surfaces and gaps requires a certain amount of judgment. What is a surface in one case may be a gap in another. Due to the fluid nature of war, gaps will rarely be permanent and will usually be fleeting. To exploit them demands flexibility and speed. We must actively seek out gaps by continuous and aggressive reconnaissance. Once we locate them, we must exploit them by funneling our forces through rapidly. For example, if we focus our effort, if our focus of effort has struck a surface, but another unit has located a gap, we shift the focus of effort to the second unit and redirect our combat power in support of it. And with that, I think completely of in the information battle space, trying to parse out where the lies are, where the information, I mean, we're being lied to all the time. Like, we understand that. But where are the lies malicious, and where are the lies being told to us? Like, where are we being told a story about something where actually it might be something positive? And the example that I would give is what I was referring to before with Maduro and Petro down in Colombia and Venezuela. We're being told that these two guys are evil and they're bad dictators and all that. But maybe that's true. They're both sanctioned now by the State Department, and they're both wanted. They both have arrest warrants out for their arrest.
That's the narrative. That's true or not.
Yeah, that's the narrative. But everything that I've seen is that Maduro has helped provide all of the legal evidence necessary to put a RICO case together against these corporatists, these commodity asset trading companies, Glencore, and all their competitors. And then, as I said, Petro has been arresting thousands of cartel members, including the leader or the founder of the Medellin cartel. I think his name is Carlos Leader. He was arrested and extradited to the United States a few months ago. And he's been Colombia has been negotiating for the past month in Qatar with the Gulf Clan, the largest cocaine cartel in Colombia now, about ending their operations. So, it doesn't even sound like that a military operation may even be necessary. We're like, I was sitting here thinking for a while that we might see, kinetic strikes against the jungles of Colombia and Venezuela, but it seems like that might not even happen because a lot of these guys have already been arrested, but we'll see. So those are the gaps. Those are the surfaces and gaps that I look for.
Well, and that goes back to what I said earlier. You reinforce success. You don't reinforce failure. So when you hit a hard surface, there's probably a gap somewhere, and once you find it, you reinforce that effort that's going toward that gap, not toward the hard point. And I think, again, that's part of the narrative. Throwing all those narratives out there is figuring out where those soft points are and where those hard points that he can't get around or he can't get through, that he's got to then go around through a gap, not through the hard surface, because that's going to take up more energy and more time than if he can get around it to a gap.
Yeah. Understood. And that makes sense. All right. Well, I think we're at. We probably need to call it here because we have Culture of Change coming up with Ash, and Abby. But Oak, I'm going to play some ads and then we're going to do rants if you don't mind sticking around.
Yep, I'm here.
Just give me a minute. Let's see.
They say confidence starts with smooth skin. And baby, Soft Disclosure Lotion delivers.
I swear by this stuff. Like, I kid you guys not. This is the first lotion I've ever had in my entire life that, like, I don't get ashy after I put it on any part of my body. Like, my hands are always dry, and my hands have not gotten ashy without, like, rinsing them through water and washing them with soap since I started putting Soft Disclosure on. Like, it is Black Man approved. I kid you not.
Black Man approved. You heard him. And let's be real. If it can handle his hands, it can handle anything.
Feet are like, they get so dry, like the heels of them, it'll just kind of like flake off. Like, but with Soft Disclosure, once you put it on, like it starts to absorb it.
Yeah, he went there. Don't worry, we won't show you his feet, but trust us, they're smoother too. Soft Disclosure Lotion is made with aloe, goat's milk, honey, and our exclusive oil blend that actually restores your skin barrier. Visit softdisclosure.com, use code BADLANDS, and get 15% off.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back in stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings, regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
All right. I have to give a shout out here to your wife, Kelly, in the chat says that you have an old saying that why carry your weapon into battle when your weapon can carry you into battle. That's pretty great.
Yeah. Well, I started off as an infantry officer, and then I switched over to armor cav, and a lot of people asked me, why would you do that? And I used to tell them, why would I carry my weapon when I can just ride on the tank? My weapon can carry me.
And then it sounds like Grant's cousin in the chat. He may have been an M1 A1 commander. So it sounds like we got some. It sounds like you have some brethren in the chat here. So welcome, Grant's cousin. It's yeah, here it is. Wow, that's crazy. I was an M1A1 tank commander, and that was never a thought when I was in. Crazy. I think he was referring to the hedgehog armor, like putting chain link fences around a tank to protect from a drone.
Again, you do what you got to do in combat. You know, in World War II, they used to put in Vietnam, they used to put sandbags on tanks just to give them that little bit of extra cushion. In combat, you come up with ways to counter whatever the enemy's throwing at you.
Yeah. I recall reading that about some of the German tanks. That was the biggest problem with the German tanks is that as well as they ran, because those Germans are so damn good at engineering, they were hard to fix because they had really, really specific parts. And my late father-in-law actually has a pair of German Lugers, and he told me the exact same problem with the Lugers. He was like, "Man, these pistols are amazing, but when a part needs to be replaced, you got to like contact a factory in Germany and give them a serial number, and they have to make like the exact part." He's like, because these guys they just make their stuff too well that you can't You can't
It's
just
not
like
interchangeable.
yeah, you can't just like jerry rig it yourself. You need an actual piece of German engineering to replace it. So, well, Oak, I really appreciate you being here. This has been awesome. We definitely are going to have you back again sometime to talk some more, because this has just been like, I could do like 3 more episodes on war fighting, because this stuff is so applicable to me. And again, everyone should go get this book, FM1 War Fighting by the Marine Corps. I think it was written in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was. I think it was 1980.
Yep, 1989.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
it was. Ghost, this has been fantastic. There's not too often anymore that I get to delve back into the military piece of it, and it's so much now. I just talk about leadership and success to civilian companies and organizations. So every chance I get to hop on and actually remember some of the old stuff that I used to talk about and train on, it's always fun.
Absolutely. And everyone, please. I'm sorry.
And like we said, that is a very easy book to read. It has to be, because it's for Marines. You know, take a shot at Alpha and CanCon here. You know, the crayon eaters. It's got to be in small words.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. It's like an Army guy promoting a Marine Corps book, but I mean, it's a great book. It really is. And after reading it so many times myself, I can definitely attest to that. Everyone, please go give Oak a follow on X. His X account is at LTC Oakland. That's LTCOAKLAND. Give him a follow. And I look forward to seeing y'all in Cocoa Beach. Y'all are going to be there?
We'll be there.
Yep, it's going to be great. That was the first GART that I went to, was the Cocoa Beach back in 2023. So great facility, great hotel. Maybe we'll even get to see, I think Jordan said in the private chat that SpaceX isn't doing a launch this time, but I think what's his name, Jeff Bezos, is doing a launch. So there will be a rocket, I think.
Yeah, there is a launch scheduled.
Yeah, there is a launch scheduled.
Well,
so
there's one scheduled. You never know.
You never know if they'll actually do it. But yeah, great, man. Well, I will look forward to seeing y'all there. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Everyone go to badlandsmedia.tv/events, get your virtual ticket or your in-person ticket if you're in Florida. In Oak, we will see you there less than 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on.
Of course. We will do this again soon. Everyone hit the thumbs up and have a good evening. Everyone go tune in to Culture of Change, which started 7 minutes ago with Ash and Abby.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.